Hey Lucy, so for my final project, I will be talking about slavery in Greco Roman. So, basically, what is the background of Philemon? So, Philemon was a well to do Roman citizen from Colossus who met Paul during his mission is in faith and became a follower of Jesus. So Philemon had slaves, and Onesimus was one of them. He wronged Philemon and ran away to Rome. Another thing, Onesimus goes to Paul in prison to appeal for help, and he also becomes a follower of Jesus. Paul makes a bold request to Philemon to receive Onesimus back, no longer as a slave, but as more than a slave, as a brother in the Lord. Then Paul is putting himself in the place of Jesus. He will absorb the consequences. He will pay the cost so that he can reconcile to Philemon. And then the implications of the good news are personal but never private. Jesus' family is a new humanity of equal partners who share together in God's healing mercy. So what is slavery in the ancient Near East? So basically, there was a lot of slavery back in that time, and these were some of the stuff that came out of it. So owners would kill them for no reason and would not be punished. Slaves were employed in a variety of settings, including private homes, mines and factories, and farms. They also worked on engineering projects for local administrators, such as road, aqueducts, and buildings. As a result, they blended in seamlessly with the general populace. Former slaves could work as writers, craftsmen, midwives, or traders when they were emancipated. Some even went on to become affluent. However, Rome's rigorous culture placed a premium on social prestige, and even successful freedmen often had to overcome the stigma of which persisted far beyond the servile itself. When Roman citizens were desperate for money, they would sell their children as slaves. In my opinion, I think that was the craziest fact out of all of them. Roman law slavery. So, Roman law saw slaves as both people and property, but a full brother will naturally not be viewed as property. Approximately 1 in 5 people living within the city of Rome was a slave, and overall the slave population of the empire ran even higher. Under Roman law, enslaved people had no personal rights and were regarded as the property of their masters. For the Israel law slavery, so basically non-Israelite slaves are acquired either by purchase or captured during war and remain so permanently. They're permanently. And foreign male slaves are circumcised and allowed to participate in Passover sacrifice, which simplified some level of integration. A woman taken captive during battle is given time to mourn. A family before becoming part of the household, and her master/husband is prohibited from selling her. This does protect women from becoming sexual chattel while taking wartime rape and forced marriage for granted. The Bible applies the Israelite Sabbath day of rest equally to slaves, appealing to Israel's scared history. Do this so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. These are a few reminders of the household codes. So the people lived in a patriarchy system of a society and government where the oldest male is the head of the household and descendants are traced through them. Therefore, the head of a household is the master and acts on behalf of the household. Household was organized hierarchically, meaning husband, father, master would exercise authority over the other members of the household. The treatment of household slaves are completely dependent on the virtue or lack of virtue of the master. This is a fun fact. So, household slaves were the only kind of slaves addressed in Paul's writing, according to the IVPBCC. So, household codes. These are an important part of keeping order in society, and this was how you cared for one another depending on the status. So these are a few statuses of a slave. So what is your status as a slave? So fun fact, slaves are free people who are frequently indistinguishable in appearance and even clothing versus the rich and poor who were distinguishable. You were seen as property and economic decision more than a person. You were disposed because you could be sold, traded, or freed. You were not socially equal at all. Slave marks. Since wearing earrings through pierced ears was widespread in the ancient Near East, piercing a slave ears was presumably for the purpose of inserting an ownership tag of some sort. Another mark was tattooed on a slave's shaved head, and so the research shows that there were status markers among household slaves, such as quality of clothing and shoes, as a means of rewarding and promoting obedience and diligent performance. And in the PowerPoint, I have a photo of that here and what it means. So, what was the treatment of household slaves? So, women, this is for the women. So, women and sometimes young boys were often exposed to sexual exploitation. They usually worked as personal maids to the wife or as households. For the men, duties varied in the ancient Near East of a household slave. However, for men, life was a lot better, and frequently slaves were better off than free laborers. Slaves, especially skilled or educated males, were often sent on errands and trusted as agents with their master's property. Such slaves could sometimes earn enough money on the side to buy their freedom, although their earnings legally belonged to their master. Slaves were normally permitted to control the money themselves. So, what was the treatment of household slaves? The family life of the slave was precarious and completely under the master's control. Slaves had no legal standing and therefore contracted no legal marriages. Those slaves would marry each other and often remain lifelong companions. For example, the women's sleeping quarters were separated from the men's sleeping quarters by a bolted door so that they may not breed without their consent. Breeding is to happen only with the master's consent. Therefore, the children born to a male slave were the property of that slave's master. Most often, those children would remain a part of this master's estate to be passed on to heirs and infinitum. So basically, the master is in control of deciding if they want children or not, or if to use them. It was always a possibility, however, that a slave would suffer seeing his family broken up if the master decided to give away or sell any of them. Paul ideals of slavery versus Old Testament law. So in Paul ideals, so in the Old Testament, Slaves are unequal to a free man. The second one I have is slaves could only partake in Passover if circumcised. Third one is slaves could be disciplined to a certain degree. And then Paul's view was slaves are free. Slaves and free men are equal in Christ. Galatians 3:28. Slaves were full members of the church and could have positions with authority. And then the third one is even the threatening of slaves is condemned. Paul's ideals of slavery versus the Rome standard. So Rome, slaves were often denied of their humanity. Slaves had limited, if any, authority, and the masters didn't have to care for their slaves' needs. Paul, slaves should be seen as human. Slaves took on roles in the church. And thirdly, slaves and masters should work to support each other in all things. And that is the completion of my final project video presentation. And some of the sources were from Baker James, Paul, from Craig, from David, Slavery in Ancient Rome, and a few others. So thank you for your time, and that is the end of my presentation.